Hey, everybody. It is June 2nd, new month, same podcast. Here you're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And Jill, sometimes on the weekends over on Premium, we walk down memory lane and go through the 30 most viral, memorable moments that live rent-free in our brains from the last 30 years.
Moshe, everything from Fabio going down the roller coaster at Busch Gardens and getting hit, a direct hit by a bird. Then you
I
had
think it was a goose.
Oh, goose. Pardon me.
A goose to the face, Fabio took.
All I know is he was covered in blood and feathers. You had George Bush giving Angela Merkel a back massage.
Shoulder rub.
Yes. Kanye West going rogue at a Hurricane Katrina benefit. I was enjoying these posts so much that at one point I was laughing so hard that my son was like, "Mommy, why are you laughing? What are you laughing at?" And they were a little too advanced, the videos for him, but it was great.
So what triggered all of it? So, those of you who might not be familiar, we have Mo News Premium. It's our page where we cover weekend news and I answer questions. And sometimes we do some just random, we go on random journeys over on Premium. So over the weekend, because there's just certain pop culture moments, Jill, that I think about probably more often than the average person. I was like, oh, this seems pretty close to the time that DJ David Guetta 5 years ago did a shout out to George Floyd's family. If you don't remember this, height of COVID, they were doing this remote fundraiser. David Guetta, French DJ, is on a rooftop in New York. And this was when we were having remote dance parties on Zoom. And they were doing this fundraiser. And it was a few days after the killing of George Floyd. And he is decides to jump in the mix. And as part of this online fundraiser, he's by the way, I put together a special mix last night, praying for peace. So shout out to George Floyd's family. He then proceeds to play basically a dance remix of the MLK I Have a Dream speech, which is just so bizarre in so many ways. Anyway, so that lives rent-free in my brain. One of my Roman empires, if you will, Jill. And then we went on this journey over on the Premium Instagram page where I threw out George Bush saying, "We must get those terrorist killers. Now watch me golf. Now watch this drive," to Kanye West going on his rant about Bush. About a quarter of the most colorful incidents from the past 25 years either involved Kanye, George Bush, or beauty pageants, because then we have Miss South Carolina and the Iraq thing that that infamous response, Steve Harvey giving the wrong Miss Universe winner and then having to pull it back live on television. Anyway, so I then asked everyone, the Mo News Premium crowd, hey, what are the moments you most remember from the last 30 years? And so we got all these suggestions. And I was like, oh, good one. Hide your wives, hide your kids. We got a rapist on the loose. All these various moments. So if you are a premium member, you probably enjoyed it over on the Instagram feed. We now have it in a highlight there. If you're not, it's one of the many reasons to join premium because, as some people said, it made their day, it made their month. This walk down memory lane of all these crazy viral moments. Kanye taking the award away from Taylor Swift. Again, another Kanye incident there. So a lot of moments there from the past 30 years that we enjoyed for a brief moment in time, but some of us think about them more often than others.
Oprah also an honorable mention. She came up a few times between the Tom Cruise jumping on the couch over Katie Holmes. You get a car. Just some of these moments. I think it's also that time period of how we talk about 90s music that stays with us. Some of these events, I think, stay with us as well. And because we weren't all kind of following different algorithms on social media and consuming different streaming platforms, there was more of a zeitgeist. There were cultural moments that just everybody followed, and you don't get them as much anymore.
Adele Nazim made an appearance. John Travolta, you'll never live that one down, Johnny.
He started strong. He's this wickedly good singer, and then he just went down.
And then he's Adele Nazim. Again, those were a few of them, but we went through a number of them. It was a lot of fun. And if you're looking to relive all of them, we have a highlight put together on the Mo News Premium Instagram page.
The Kanye West at the Hurricane.
Oh, people, and by the way, if you think you remember some of these things, you do need to rewatch them because they're even more ridiculous. Like looking back at them 20 years later, like just watching Mike Myers react to Kanye going rogue, being like, "They're trying to kill us." Like George Bush hates black people, and then they cut to Chris Tucker, who's just like, and then like it's supposed to be the scripted Katrina fundraiser on NBC. Anyway. and that was one of the things too. People were like, oh my god, I forgot that Kanye like basically showed us who he was 20 years ago. I was like, yeah, no, he's always been very clear about who he was.
The Kanye Katrina clip, Mike Myers' reaction, Chris Tucker's reaction, as someone who also works in TV and knows what a control room is like. I watched this so many times thinking, what is happening in the control room right now? And they're just it's
a live fundraiser, and Kanye has gone off script.
Bold move going back to Kanye after the first.
Yeah. They were stuck. Anyway, let's not give away the whole story here, but it was a very entertaining ride. We go all the way back to George H.W. Bush vomiting on the Japanese prime minister on TV back in 91 as well.
Oh, God. All right. Well, Moshe, I appreciated it. I got some very good laughs. So thank you for that.
It's all in a weekend's work over on the premium page for all of you. mo.news/premium to join, guys.
All right. No shortage of news. Let's get to the headlines. Following the developments of what the FBI is saying was a targeted terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, Sunday on a group holding a march to raise awareness for Israeli hostages, what we know. Some scrutiny over pardons. President Trump pardoned 27 people last week, while his supporters say President Biden set the precedent for this, and how much some people are paying lobbyists to get their case in front of Trump. Overseas this weekend, a major strike by Ukraine on the Russian Air Force, and chaotic scenes emerging from near an aid distribution site in Gaza where dozens of Palestinians have been killed. What we know about what happened there, what the questions still are, as Hamas and Israel do appear to be getting closer to a ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, the U.S. has sent a proposal for a nuclear deal to Tehran. Details emerge that Iran is continuing to refine uranium during the talks. Questions also emerging about the Trump administration's enlisting a data analytics tech company to gather and organize data on Americans, concerns about privacy. And some video that must be seen to be believed. We mean believed. 14 million bees escaped from an overturned truck in Washington state.
Jill, we'll have the latest from their Believe It or Not, Mo News community members live nearby and gave us some exclusive details about why there were 14 million bees in a truck up there. As some of you wrote, a new fear has been unlocked. Thanks, Moshe.
Staying with animals, researchers using artificial intelligence to decode what animals are saying to each other. Does this mean we'll eventually be able to talk to pets and all animals for that matter?
And what that could mean, Jill.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? I already talked to my pets.
In their language, though, Jill.
A big weekend for Taylor Swift. She now owns all of her old music. We'll tell you what the Swifties think she's signaling with her announcement, and the debate about the financial part of the deal.
And what I learned this weekend, when you question anything Taylor Swift does, how many people fill your inbox.
I could have told you that, Moshe. And I saw the post, and I'm like,
it wasn't negative towards her. I was
just,
we were just making an observation. We'll explain. I am a Taylor Swift fan. I am supportive of the deal. We were just asking questions, Jill, just asking questions.
And it's a great week to be a sports fan. Both the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup kicks off this week. We're going to have a preview of what storylines you should be watching out for. Plus, Moshe has on this day in history.
Jill, your clue today, Oh Captain, My Captain. It has to do with the movie that came out on this day in history.
Yes, we know.
Oh, do you know the answer?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone.
But I've had confidence before and
You've had
it wrong.
Confidence before, but we're from the same era. So I think you probably know this one.
Okay, starting with that breaking news out of Colorado, multiple people at Boulder's Pearl Street Mall were burned when they were attacked by a man during a march for Israeli hostages on Sunday. A male suspect who is now in custody attacked people with Molotov cocktails. They were participating in a walk meant to call attention to the nearly 60 Israeli hostages who remain in Gaza. Boulder's police chief says the injuries range from serious to minor. Local police say they're investigating, and federal authorities, including the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, he is calling it a targeted terror attack.
Yeah, we posted videos Sunday evening from Boulder, Colorado, people writhing on the ground there, Jill, awaiting first responders. There's a number of videos of the attacker. He's shirtless in the park, yelling, threatening. It sounds heavily accented, but he's saying things like "end Zionist" or "end Zionism," shouting at folks. Apparently, he had like a makeshift flamethrower as he was launching Molotov cocktails at this awareness walk. And Jill, we got the name from the FBI late on Sunday night. His name is Mohammed Sabri Soleiman. He's a 45-year-old who was also shouting "Free Palestine," and apparently was talking to authorities afterwards. Jill, we're also learning late on Sunday via senior Department of Homeland Security sources telling Fox News that this guy, Mohammed Sabri Soleiman, is an Egyptian national who actually first arrived in the U.S. in 2022. So less than 3 years ago, he overstayed his visa. He was on a non-immigrant visa, was supposed to be allowed to stay until 2023. He overstayed, never left. He apparently filed some sort of asylum claim, and the Biden administration gave him work authorization that actually expired in March. So he has overstayed his visa. He's an Egyptian national. So there are questions here as we learn these details about how he'll be prosecuted, deportation questions, a whole variety of things as we learn about this Egyptian national who conducted this attack. A number of leaders already on Sunday evening calling out anti-Semitism, calling out this attack. The organization that was conducting the walk here was called Run for Their Lives. They say this was not a protest. It was a peaceful walk. They do it weekly to show solidarity with the hostages and their families and plea for their release, raise awareness. And they have been doing this since October 7th. So going for more than a year and a half now, and it's not just in Boulder, it's across the country. They often stop at the courthouse there in Boulder, sing songs, tell stories, read the names of the hostages every week. There were about 36 folks participating in this week's walk. We're still awaiting details as of Sunday night on the injuries, the nature of the injuries, but some of them are pretty significant here. Several burn victims here. These incendiary devices exploded. Some people literally lit on fire, and they were being cared for by people in the park searching for water, trying to put out these fires as quickly as possible. And this comes just after that attack in Washington, D.C., where a man from Chicago flew to D.C. and conducted a shooting outside a Jewish event in D.C., killing 2 Israeli embassy employees as they were walking out. Now, that event was held by the American Jewish Committee. I heard from people, Joe, in the Mo News community from Boulder who were aware of this organization and the walk, who said that they'd asked for more security from Boulder police in the last week since that incident in D.C., but were told by Boulder police that they believed they had enough personnel in the area, and so they did not assign extra police, extra law enforcement to this walk yesterday.
So we'll, of course, stay on top of that story, as I am sure more details will be emerging throughout the day today.
Yeah, we'll have the latest for you over on Instagram.
All right, President Trump's pardons getting increasing scrutiny. He's been pardoning a number of notable people since taking office in January, including 27 people in the last week alone. Since his second term started, he has pardoned or granted executive clemency to more than 1,500 people, most related to the January 6th, 2021 insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. But even without the January 6th defendants, he's already pardoned 58 people. Historically, presidents wait until the end of their terms for most pardons, but Trump has been off to a pretty quick start so far. In his entire first term, he pardoned 144 people, and only one of those was in the first year of his first term. Now, in the second term, many are people who have supported him politically despite being convicted of crimes. Just last week, Trump pardoned reality TV stars Todd and Julie Christie, who were convicted in 2022 on defrauding community banks and tax evasion. They became famous through their reality show, Christie Knows Best. Their daughter spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2024. The couple was released from prison this week following the pardon, despite having a number of years left on their sentences. Other recent pardons: a rapper named NBA Youngboy, former New York Republican Congressman Michael Grimm, Jason Galanis and Devin Archer, who had testified in House GOP inquiries into the conduct of Hunter Biden. They were former business partners of Biden. Another recent pardon was for Paul Walzak, a former nursing home executive. He had been convicted of stealing millions of dollars from his employee. His mother was a major fundraiser and donor for Trump. And then there is former Virginia Sheriff Scott Jenkins. He was serving 10 years for fraud and bribery. Jenkins' attorney tweeted, "No MAGA left behind." One of the people speaking out this weekend is former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. We know he's not a fan of Trump, but he is concerned that Trump's taking things to a whole new level when it comes to exchanging pardons for political support. Take a listen.
He's got categories of pardons. You got the pay-to-play pardons. You've got the reality TV stars turned supporters. And then you've got the folks out there who are just victims of what he calls weaponization of the Justice Department. But all of them have one thing in common, which is you've got to be whole hog for Donald Trump. Never before have we seen a president who makes it a gate to getting to a pardon to be a political supporter of his, a vocal current political supporter.
Yeah, so Chris Christie worried about the precedent here. He says that white-collar crime will be meaningless if they know that anybody can commit a crime if they know somebody and they get the right lobbyist, or they have somebody they know who supports the president, can then get a pardon for it, regardless of whether a jury's convicted you, regardless of the amount of evidence there. I mean, some of these people, the Chrisleys, for instance, Jill, they defrauded community banks to the tune of $30 million plus. But, of course, they had people close to them who were close to Trump. And so you have the White House here saying, well, no, we felt that the punishment didn't serve the crime and they should be getting out of prison here, even though they haven't even served half their sentence. They're just a couple years into sentence and they each receive different sentences. But in all the cases here, what unifies it is that ultimately they support the president. And so the president has started granting these pardons out. Now, what the White House, the current White House, will say, well, Joe Biden started it. Joe Biden granted more than 4,200 acts of clemency and pardons during his 4 years in office. That, when you add it all up, both clemency, which means they lower your sentencing, or pardon, which means you're completely pardoned of your crimes, that is more than any other president since the beginning of the 20th century. Now, when you specifically look at pardons, it's not as many, but he includes all those clemencies, and it becomes a very big number there for Biden. Of course, the big thing with Biden is, in those last couple days and those last couple hours, he gave pardons to his son, Hunter, other family members, Dr. Anthony Fauci, members of the January 6th committee, a whole variety of folks. Some of them Joe literally issued in the last minutes of his presidency before Trump took over. And so there's a feeling among Republicans, well, at least Trump is doing these transparently and straightforwardly, not in the dark of night, not in the last seconds of his presidency, which is sort of like, well, not defending your pardon. It's more saying, well, the other guy did it worse.
He did it too.
He did it too. He robbed the banks at night as opposed to robbing the banks during the day, is sort of the argument you hear there from the Trump side here. So, Jill, it's not even just Chris Christie there, who we know is a longtime critic of Trump, but you are hearing from Republicans on Capitol Hill a discomfort with the pardons here. And of course, there were that mass pardoning for everyone convicted of January 6 crimes that included folks, by the way, who had previous convictions for things like pedophilia and other violent crimes in the past, including a number of people who assaulted police officers on camera. And so there was that sort of blanket pardon for all of them that also caused concern among Republicans. But again, you have the pushback from the White House saying, well, we feel that this is totally legitimate because look what Biden did. And I will add here, Jill, when you talk to Democrats about this, they will say, yes, we didn't like that Biden pardoned his son. We didn't like some of that stuff at the end, but ultimately this was not like a mass favor trading situation where random celebrities, criminals, white collar criminals are basically trading like explicitly support for the president in exchange for a pardon.
It comes as NBC News reports that seeking a pardon from President Trump has become big business for lobbying firms. People seeking a pardon are willing to spend millions of dollars to get their case to Trump. Two people directly familiar with proposals told NBC they knew of a client's offer of $5 million to help get a case to Trump. They say the key to reaching Trump is pushing a message that centers on the Democrats politicizing the Justice Department or overzealous prosecutors, and taking that message on conservative media outlets that Trump is known to watch. Cozying up to a president's allies or hiring lobbyists to gain access to clemency isn't new, but these numbers really speak to just this new pardon economy, if you want to call it that. What's also different is, as we mentioned, Trump is doing these pardons on a regular basis. Most presidents would wait until the end of their administration when a controversial pardon can't do them any political harm. So that is obviously not what we're seeing here with Trump, who's issuing these pardons in the first months of his term.
Yeah, because again, as I said before, it's like, well, what about Biden? What about Biden? What about Hunter Biden? What about Hunter Biden? And so that's a bit of the message you're hearing here. So they feel like totally comfortable not having to wait on these things and letting the president do whatever it is he wishes to do whenever he wishes to do. One of the people looking for a pardon from President Trump right now, by the way, is former New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, Gold Bar Bob, who was convicted recently, sentenced to 11 years in prison for bribery, extortion, doing work on behalf of the Egyptian government while he was the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. How is Bob Menendez trying to get to Donald Trump? Well, via X, where he's posting things going against Barack Obama, talking about Democrats politicizing the justice system, saying he's a victim of a politicized justice system by Democrats. And so he is set to go to prison in just the next few weeks here. And interestingly, he's hoping that this message will hit Trump here in the same way you've seen it expressed by some of these other folks who've gotten pardons recently. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, who recently got his case dropped and is being accused of a quid pro quo with President Trump in exchange for that. And so that's one of the more controversial things here. A reminder here for all of you who have questions about the pardon system. This goes back to the beginning of the forming of the Republic. The founding fathers put pardon power in Article 2. Article 2 powers are the president's powers in the Constitution. And they were inspired by pardon power that the British monarch had, saying, the ability to extend mercy to people by the executive seems like a good thing. And, we believe that the presidents will exercise this with restraint over time. And there was an internal debate, Jill, among the founding fathers, like, hey, will this pardon power be abused by future presidents? They're like, well, if it is, Congress will deal with it because they could impeach the president for inappropriately pardoning folks. I don't think they anticipated that the vast majority of pardons would happen like the last few minutes of a presidency, nor do I think they anticipated where we would get to today, 250 years later. So for those of you asking about checks on pardon power, the belief was, and it still stands as far as the law is concerned, it's up to Congress to check the president if they feel that he is behaving inappropriately or unethically when it comes to who they're issuing pardons to.
Okay, now let's head abroad to two major wars that we are watching. The first, the war in Ukraine, where the Ukrainians went on offense Sunday. A Ukrainian drone attack destroyed more than 40 Russian planes deep in Russia's territory. It came after Russia pounded Ukraine with missiles and drones, all of this just hours before a new round of direct peace talks in Istanbul. As for the Ukrainian air assault on Russian planes, a Ukrainian military official said that the far-reaching attack took more than a year and a half to execute and was personally supervised by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. The drones hit more than 40 Russian planes, including long-range bombers to launch missiles at Ukraine, as well as planes that are used to coordinate targets and detect air defenses and guided missiles. Some of the bases targeted were more than 2,500 miles from Ukraine, deep into Russia.
Yeah, 2,500 miles, Jill. We're talking about the Arctic Circle. We're talking about Siberia. I mean, this was a very long-planned attack by the Ukrainians here. As you mentioned, 18 months. They had smuggled these drones far deep into Russia, stored them in wooden pallets, loaded them onto trucks. They drove them to different parts of Russia and then decided to deploy the attack this weekend. It's the largest ever aerial assault by the Ukrainians on Russia, trying to teach a lesson to Vladimir Putin that, they still have cards here, to sort of put it in Trump's terms. They still have cards to play here. They have power here, and they can do some real damage, specifically to several dozen planes in the Russian Air Force that have been key to bombing Ukrainian targets over the course of the past 3 years during the war. Now, you have the Russians here calling this a terrorist attack in 5 regions. They say they were able to repel it in certain places, but they really caught the Russians off guard here, given where the attack took place. And it is interesting, Jill, because literally ceasefire peace talks are scheduled today, and they're still set to take place here. So it'll be interesting to see the Russian reaction and what impact this attack, and of course we should mention that we're also Russian attacks on Ukraine this weekend, have on the talks here.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Hamas announcing on Sunday that it is, quote, ready to immediately start a round of indirect negotiations to reach an agreement on the points of contention. on a ceasefire and hostage release deal with Israel. The announcement came a day after the terror group replied to the current U.S.-Israeli offer over the weekend with a number of requests and changes. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff responded that the Hamas counteroffer, which included a demand that Israel end the war for good and offered the return of 10 living hostages over 60 days, along with the bodies of 18 dead Israeli hostages in exchange for 1,100 Palestinian prisoners. A number of the provisions were deemed by the U.S. as, quote, totally unacceptable, and Witkoff saying that it, quote, takes us backward.
Yeah, so you push back on Hamas, and now you have that latest Hamas statement Sunday evening. This deal, by the way, would still leave about 10 or 11 living Israeli hostages inside Gaza after 60 days, as well as upwards of about 20 bodies of dead hostages inside Gaza. And there's this feeling that they just need to sign one deal, finish all this exchange, because this process continues to just go on. And that was one of the issues they had with the Hamas counterproposal, is Hamas wanted to do a couple hostages the first day, then wait 30 days, do a couple more hostages, then wait till the 60th day to do more hostages as far as exchange here. And so the Israelis and the U.S. were like, that's a non-starter. And there's just a larger issue here in terms of aid deployment. Hamas very much would like to be involved in the aid deployment, or at least wants the UN to be involved in the aid again, as opposed to this new Israeli-U.S. operation that's been involved in distributing aid that we told you about last week. For Hamas, for many years, the way they make their money and the way that they kind of hold their power is by overseeing the aid distribution, or I should say, in their case, aid selling process, because they take the free aid and then they sell it to the Palestinian people there in Gaza. The big thing for Hamas also is they want to continue to rule in Gaza. As far as Netanyahu and the Israelis are concerned, that is a non-starter for them. So there is still a number of issues here separating the two sides. You do have a number of the Arab countries, the Qataris, the Egyptians, really trying to put some pressure here, saying, we need an end to the fighting here.
Moshe, so we're watching that, and we've been tracking a deadly incident near one of those Israeli and U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid facilities. According to witnesses, at least 30 people were killed and more than 200 injured, about a half a mile from one of those sites. Hamas claims the Israeli military took aim at civilians, while the Israeli Defense Forces denied that there were any casualties from IDF gunfire. After carrying out a preliminary investigation, the Israeli military said that it determined the troops did not fire at civilians while they were near or within the humanitarian aid distribution site, and that reports to this effect are false. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation denied reports of deaths, saying that it distributed 16 truckloads of food at the site on Sunday morning, quote, without incident, and blamed Hamas for fomenting rumors about deaths at their aid distribution sites.
Yeah, so we're still trying to get to the bottom of what took place here about a half mile, about a kilometer away from the aid distribution site. Hamas, as we've mentioned, is trying to make a point of trying to bring down this facility, trying to deter people from using it. The Israelis released footage on Sunday of masked men shooting at the people in the crowd, saying this was a Hamas attack on Palestinians, again, to try to kind of foment unrest and blame it on Israel. So, we're hearing a lot of reports. A lot of things are murky. There were some initial reports on Sunday that sort of took Hamas's word for it. And then those reports were corrected as the Israelis came out with their statements here, investigated what took place. So just a reminder to all of you. And this, I think, Jill, applies to what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. It also applies to what's happening in the Gaza Strip. Is the first report really depends on who's reporting it. And so don't take it to the bank. Give it some time as details unfold, because typically the first headline does not turn out to be totally accurate. And so this all comes as there's just been this huge fight over aid distribution in Gaza. The Israelis and the U.S. pushed out the UN due to their links among some of the officials there to Hamas. They've been trying to roll out this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's had its criticisms. We told you about the incident last week where people rushed it at a certain point. But for the most part, has been pretty organized for the first week here. But the UN is extremely critical of it. They say that the Israelis and Americans are weaponizing the system. They won't cooperate with the new distribution because the UN has lost its power there. So the UN, Hamas not partaking in the system. Hamas has specific cause to take issue with it. That said, the incident in Rafah on Sunday, extremely concerning given how precarious things are. As we told you, the ceasefire talks now continue. And, that is one of just the latest reason why there are so many people trying to push the Israelis and Hamas to come to a deal here. Jill, before we leave these international headlines, I just want to, while we're in the region in the Middle East, note that the U.S. did deliver a revised nuclear proposal to Iran over the weekend. We've been telling you about the Iran-U.S. talks now going back more than a month. There have been various meetings in Italy as well as in the Middle East here. The U.S. really pushing for a deal here that will prevent the Iranians from enriching uranium. And notably, over the weekend, the International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran has actually been enriching uranium during these talks over the course of the past few months. They now have a stockpile of 900 pounds of uranium enriched to 60%. What does that mean? Well, if you enrich uranium to 90%, that can be fuel for a nuclear weapon. You only need it to be enriched at a much lower level to be used as it for a nuclear power plant. Well, they're enriching things to the point where it's about one step away from fueling a nuclear weapon. And so just for translation purposes, they have enough uranium to produce roughly about 10 nuclear bombs at this point if they just up the enrichment. Just as of January, when Trump took office, they had about 5. So they've doubled their capacity in just these past few months, giving a lot of people pause and leading them to question whether the Iranians are very serious about these talks with the U.S. right now or are just buying time.
All right, time for the speed read, starting with a story getting a ton of questions on our premium Instagram page over the weekend from the New York Times. The Trump administration has signed deals for hundreds of millions of dollars with a tech company that's expanding the government's ability to spy on its own citizens. In the past few months, a data analytics firm called Palantir that was co-founded by venture capitalist and PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel has received significant federal government contracts with agencies like the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Thiel, by the way, is a major supporter of the president. The firm Palantir has technology that will help organize and analyze data across government agencies. The fear from civil liberties and privacy advocates is that it could be used by the Trump administration to create detailed portraits of Americans based on government data. Some current and former Palantir employees are concerned that the company risks becoming the face of Trump's political agenda and could be vulnerable if data on Americans is breached or hacked. In May, 13 former employees signed a letter urging Palantir to stop its work with Trump. Palantir declined to comment on its work with the Trump administration. The White House also wouldn't comment on the use of Palantir's technology and referred to Trump's executive order, which he signed back in March, which called for the federal government to share data across agencies. Some critics saw that executive order as a move to compile a master list of personal information on Americans that could significantly expand the executive branch's surveillance power.
Yeah, one of the big concerns here is this will organize the data and take your, data from TSA and from ICE and from IRS and from the Social Security Administration and the various agencies and put it together and organize it in a way that, again, privacy advocates, student unions, labor rights organizations are concerned about. So they have filed lawsuits here to block data access, questioning whether the government could weaponize people's personal information here. I imagine we're going to hear more from the White House about this this week in terms of what exactly is behind this Palantir contract. There's also other contracts in the offing here, Jill, with the Department of Defense and other parts of the government here. Palantir was founded back in 2003. It specializes in finding patterns in data, presenting information in ways that are easy to process and navigate. So there are certainly ways that they could probably use this in a productive way to better organize what is a very disorganized government. The concern is once you get things very organized and you streamline data in this way, it can be used for both good and for bad. And what safeguards exist is the big question for everybody right now, including the folks suing the government over this.
Now to a story from the West Coast creating a lot of buzz.
Get it?
From the Seattle Times, approximately 14 million bees escaped from a truck carrying more than 70,000 pounds of honeybee hives when the truck overturned Friday in northern Washington state. That truck had been trying to make a tight turn in the road. Authorities kept the road where the accident happened closed for 24 hours to allow the bees to find their queen bee and return to their hives. More than 24 beekeepers responded to the scene to help rescue the bees. The truck was transporting the bees to South Dakota after they had pollinated a local blueberry field.
So, Jill, I learned a lot this weekend, including the fact that people rent bees, like millions of bees, to pollinate their fields. We actually heard from people in the Mo News community who live up there near Linden, Washington. This is like up there a couple miles from the Canadian border. And they happen to follow us. Several of them, actually. They met each other in the comments, Jill. It was actually like very cool to see. People like, oh, you there's more Mo News fans who like live up here, and so they're all talking to each other. And so they said that they were in touch with the friends who had a raspberry field up there, who had rented these European honeybees to help with their efforts there. Whatcom County in Washington is home to Bee City, USA, which helps protect and grow bee populations. So there's a lot of beekeepers in the area, and they were deployed to the incident. Apparently, there's a whole process, Jill. And if you guys are interested enough, we will do a special podcast on this. Like, how does one retrieve 14 million bees? Jill, the freakier thing was when the first headline came out, it was 250 million bees. And then the sheriff's department had to like revise it down to 14 million bees, which is still a lot of bees. We put up some video over on Instagram. Apparently, some of the first responders, some of the journalists on the scene were stung by the bees multiple times. But luckily, they're honeybees, so the stings were not too severe. Apparently, if you don't mess with them, they don't mess with you. But when there's 14 million of them, I presume the bees assume you're messing with them. And they were probably just freaked out by the tractor overturning, etc. Now, my understanding is most of the bees survived. They went back to their queens, and I guess there's a whole process the beekeepers use to get the bees back to where they need to be so they can take them to that next destination and handle another field there. I guess now some are in the wild, and given that it was about 3 miles from the Canadian border, I imagine someone over the border there. So you're welcome, Canada. You got some bees up there if you live in British Columbia.
They're undocumented.
Yeah, right. The undocumented bees are crossing the border there until Immigration and Customs Enforcement is able to up their border fencing.
From The Guardian, speaking of animals, researchers hard at work trying to translate what animals are saying to one another with the use of artificial intelligence, of course. There is hope that we might be able to speak with animals in the years ahead thanks to AI, which can sort through millions of recorded animal sounds to find other species' hidden language. One project is using AI to analyze the codas, or rapid series of clicks that sperm whales use to communicate. And there is evidence to suggest that whales take turns using specific clicks to refer to one another and even have distinct dialects. Last month, Google released an AI program that's designed to translate dolphins based on 40 years of dolphin sound recordings. It's looking to find recurring sound patterns that could explain specific dolphin behaviors. AI is able to cluster animal sounds by similarity, find hidden patterns, and match the sounds that animals make with their behavior. But that alone may not be enough for us to fully understand what they are saying.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. Jill, there was a study recently in Israel, actually, where they took a lot of recordings of bats, and they figured out that the bats were arguing with one another based on various audio clues. So there are a lot of Dr. Doolittles out there who are looking to speak to the animals over time, and AI, because of its ability to process so much information, there's a lot of hope there that that can help us. At the same time, we should note that animals, like humans, are very complex. It's not just about the sounds they make, but there's an array of visual, chemical, even thermal clues. So even if AI can translate what the sounds may mean, it may not be enough for humans to fully understand what they're trying to communicate. Say, for instance, Jill, animal sarcasm, right? We might, not understand the tone in which the whale or the dolphin or the owl is using when they say, "Sure, I'll do that." Or, "I love that idea."
Like my daughter, who's 6 and doesn't totally understand sarcasm yet.
Yeah, well, exactly. So AI is sort of like your daughter at this point. I don't know that AI can interpret sarcasm, especially when it comes to animals. And then, of course, there's a whole complex web of things that, well, it'll be some time before we speak to the animals, but still very interesting that they're working on this. There are ethical considerations as well. Like, for example, if we find animals are capable of complex language, how do we deal with that as humans, like without interfering with the animals? How do we not take advantage of the animals in certain ways if we can learn how to speak with them or tell them what to do, etc.? So true translation here of animals is still years away, but it will be useful, they hope, for understanding animal needs as well as conservation efforts, as well as, getting to the bottom of why your dog chewed through, half of your closet. Explain yourself, Fido.
From NPR, Taylor Swift announced Friday that she's regained ownership of the master recordings of her first 6 albums after a 6-year battle for control over her music. In other words, Moshe, she's telling the world of her music, "You belong with me." In a letter to fans she posted on social media, Swift said, quote, "All of the music I've ever made now belongs to me." She also highlighted that she now owns all associated materials, including music videos, concert films, album art, and unreleased songs. It comes after the 2019 sale of her original masters to Scooter Braun's Ithaca Holdings without her consent when his company acquired her former record label, Big Machine Records. The move kicked off a long-running feud between Swift and Braun. Braun says he was targeted by Taylor's fans, and it led Swift to begin re-recording 4 of her early albums as Taylor's version albums. After making tens of millions of dollars, Braun then sold her masters to Shamrock Capital, which also made tens of millions of dollars off of them, even as Taylor re-recorded 4 of the albums. Now, Taylor reportedly bought the masters back from Shamrock Capital for about $360 million.
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey there for her music. And now, in some cases, Jill, she has 2 versions of 4 albums available to stream for everybody. There's been a lot of debate in the direct messages, not about whether she should have done this. Obviously, she wanted to own all of her music again, and so she made that investment. The question that was being posed, and that some people were like, "What does it matter?" was whether it was the wisest financial decision with $360 million. Could she do better, like investing $360 million in other ways than buying her masters back? Now, at the same time, others said, well, the value of these masters could grow exponentially over time, so this is a smart call. Others saying she'd be better off with $360 million in the S&P index, and that she would have a couple $1 billion based on that. Jill, billionaire problems, I guess. Like, do I invest in this much and only make $200 million? Do I invest it in this, in my masters, or in the S&P and make $1 billion off of it? Nonetheless, her collection, her empire, all under her umbrella again. And it comes as the Swifties were trying to decode the letter that she released on Friday. There were signs in the letter of the number 12, including that she uses the word "this" with 12 eyes. 12, of course, a suggestion to fans that the 12th album is now coming soon. Taylor is very coded in the way that she releases things. She has these lucky numbers, the time that the statement was put out, various elements in the letter, showing the fans, Jill, that yes, it appears Taylor is working on yet another album, as now all of her other albums are under the same roof again. And there were some photos released over the weekend. It appeared she was celebrating the news with her friend Selena Gomez out on the town in New York over the weekend.
And Moshe, as you said earlier in the podcast, you learned the hard way that unless it is just full on Taylor Swift praise, you're going to hear it.
Right. Like we at Mo News engage in discussions about things like, hey, like this person did this. Like, do we think that was smart? Were there other ways they could approach it? Well, let me tell you something. The Taylor Swift people don't want anything questioned. They don't want a single thing questioned or even posing the question. Again, I'm not saying that she made a bad move or an unintelligent move or a financially unsavvy move. We were just having a financial debate of like, if you had $360 million, how would you invest it? Is this the smartest thing? And a bunch of people are like, Moshe, not interested. I'm just streaming the albums this weekend. Okay, Swifties, it's like them and the Beehive. Not the Beehive we talked about earlier, but like the Bayhive. Like you can't question anything. Can't even pose questions. Not even questioning in a bad way. Pose questions.
I think the Swifties might be more protective of her than Beyonce's crew. I think, but it's close.
Jill, based on my direct messages, I think they're
I could be wrong. I'm smart enough never to go after either of them.
Again, I didn't go after
or even just like mention their names.
Yes.
Okay, finally from CBS Sports, it is a great time of year if you are a sports fan with both the NBA and Stanley Cup set to kick off this week. The NBA Finals start Thursday on ABC. It features a matchup between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. It is the first time the Pacers have been to the finals in 25 years. The Thunder are making their first appearance since 2012. The Pacers got here by beating the New York Knicks in 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals, breaking hearts across the New York area Saturday night. Moshe, you holding up? Or are you not really a Knicks fan? Because
they're sort of an adopted team. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. I adopted them. So, a little sad, but not like these folks who've been waiting for years for their team. Like not that level of sadness by any means.
Meanwhile, the Thunder took out the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games to claim the West. The Thunder, the heavy favorites out of the gate. But Indiana has been playing as the underdog for most of these playoffs, so this is not going to be different for them. So we'll see.
Yeah, a lot of good storylines to watch. They're both small market teams, so we'll see how the ratings do for these NBA finals. Indiana versus Oklahoma City. Typically, sort of, they won't admit this publicly, but the NBA always looking for an LA or a New York or a big market team, big name to be in the finals for ratings purposes. A couple players to watch. You got the Thunder's Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, known as SGA. The Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton. How these guys do could determine who wins here. And what's interesting here in the NBA, Jill, is this is now going to ensure that the NBA has a new winner for the 7th year in a row. That has been pretty rare because you used to have these big legacy teams like the Bulls or the Warriors or the Lakers or the Heat that would win, year after year. And now you have this new era of parity in the NBA and free agency where new year, new winner nearly every year.
Meanwhile, on the ice, we are seeing the repeat of last year's Stanley Cup Finals, a championship rematch taking place between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers starting Wednesday. Florida beat Edmonton last year, so they're looking to become repeat champs. It is just the 5th time since 1967 that there has been a championship rematch in consecutive years.
Yeah, so this is the opposite of the NBA, where there's a new winner every year. Here, literally a repeat of last year's Stanley Cup again. And so we will see whether Edmonton can pull off a victory this year after that 7-game loss to Florida last year. Jill, this is a big thing for the Canadiens. They have not won in a few decades, the Stanley Cups. They're looking to bring the cup back across the border this year. All right, we end here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1886, Frances Folsom, known as Frankie, 21 years old, becomes the youngest First Lady in American history. A marriage at the White House takes place. She marries 49-year-old President Grover Cleveland. Again, Frances Folsom is 21. A wild and slightly creepy story here, Jill. We've talked about it on Premium before. When she was 11, Frances's father died, and Grover Cleveland became her legal guardian. He remained very close with her mother. At the time, years later, observers were like, oh, Grover Cleveland's totally going to marry the widow, totally going to marry the mom. They were surprised when they found out that he married the daughter. Again, he was 49, she was 21. He was the legal guardian when she was a child. Anyway, he enters the White House a bachelor. They get married. They have a couple kids. In fact, their daughter Esther becomes the first baby born in the White House during his presidency. On this day in 1954, Senator Joseph McCarthy charges that communists have infiltrated the CIA and the atomic weapons industry. If you're familiar with McCarthyism or Joseph McCarthy, he was basically accusing everyone left and right of being a communist. The State Department, major agencies, the U.S. Army, a variety of folks. And so going after the CIA here, saying that they're a bunch of commies as well, sort of escalated things to an even new level. It came in 54, just months after Edward R. Murrow, the CBS journalist, started questioning McCarthy and his tactics of bullying and guilt by association. And later that year, McCarthy would be admonished and starts to lose his influence as the media and Murrow scrutinize him, and his colleagues started to question whether he might actually be full of it. All right, we end here with a bit of pop culture history. The answer to the clue at the beginning, "Oh, Captain, My Captain." Jill, did you remember the movie?
That would be Dead Poets Society.
You would be right. Dead Poets Society, starring Robin Williams, premiered in theaters on this day 36 years ago, June 2nd, 1989. Great movie, Jill.
It is, and it still holds, right? It's
Yeah.
one of those movies from decades ago that you watch it and you're like, they don't make movies like this anymore.
I have to say, the Robin Williams movies hold up. Good Morning Vietnam, Dead Poets Society, Good Will Hunting. Hell, even Mrs. Doubtfire.
I agree with you.
The
It's
Birdcage.
still funny.
Actually, you think of Robin Williams, what a loss, but incredible, incredible talent. Also, on this day in history, The Wire on HBO premiered on this day, June 2nd, 2002. So The Wire turns 23 years old today.
I think The Wire, also one of those shows that really holds up. It is a perennial favorite in my house. We watch all 5 seasons, I'd say, every couple of years.
Even season two is so slow. The port season.
The port season is the weakest link.
It's tough. You got to get through season 2 to really get to 3, 4, and 5. But it's like, and a lot of those shows have those seasons. Ozark has a season like that. Breaking Bad has a season like that, where you're just like, oh, this is the tough season.
But it's interesting that it is season 2
Yeah.
of the show, because usually that would be the last season that kind of slows down and isn't as good. But The Wire just gets better.
And one piece of music history on this day, on June 2nd, 2001, Christina Aguilera, Little Kim, Maya, and Pink get together and get to number one with Lady Marmalade on this day in history.
Memories.
Where's my soul, sisters? Let me hear your flow, sister. Hey, sister, go, sister, soul, sister, go, sister.
Between On This Day in History and your premium feed, Moshe, you helped me out over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, gitchy, yeah. Joel, let's end this podcast.
It's going off the rails. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and all of those reviews really help. So please write us a kind review in the App Store. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I checked out the reviews over the weekend, Jill. Appreciate all of you who took a moment around my birthday and that last week of May to write your reviews. They continue to keep Mo News going strong in the Apple News rankings there. So we will see you back here tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.